There's this thing you do when you're scrolling at night and you see someone who's really made it. Someone who's mastered their craft, built something impressive, lives with this quiet confidence that seems unreachable. And for a second you feel inspired. Then that feeling curdles into something else. Something that whispers you're too far behind, you started too late, you don't have what it takes. So you close the app and tell yourself you'll start tomorrow. Except tomorrow you do the same thing. I've been thinking about why that happens. Why we're so drawn to the idea of mastery but so terrified of the actual process. And I keep coming back to this guy who lived 400 years ago in Japan, killed over 60 men in duels, never lost a single fight, and died completely alone in a cave writing about emptiness. His name was Miyamoto Musashi. And if you think this is going to be one of those videos about discipline and waking up at 5 a.m. in cold showers, you can relax. Because what Musashi actually understood was way more uncomfortable than that. He understood that most of us are running from the one thing that would actually change our lives. And it's not laziness. It's not lack of discipline. It's something quieter and more painful than that. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Musashi wrote 2 books near the end of his life. One was called The Book of 5 Rings, which everyone knows about. The other was called Dokkodo, which translates to The Path of Aloneness. 21 rules he wrote a week before he died. No explanation, no elaboration, just statements. Things like, do not seek pleasure for its own sake, and accept everything just the way it is. Most people read that stuff and think it's about being some stoic warrior monk who doesn't feel anything. But that's not what he's saying. What he's saying is way more specific and way more relevant to whatever you're avoiding right now in your own life. He's saying that you already know what you need to do. You've always known. But you've built an entire architecture of distraction and self-deception to avoid knowing it. And until you're willing to sit with that knowledge, really sit with it, without immediately reaching for your phone or a snack or another YouTube video, nothing fundamental is going to change. Let me tell you what I mean. Musashi talks about something he calls seeing truly. Not seeing what you want to see, not seeing what you're afraid to see, but seeing what's actually there. And this is where it gets uncomfortable. Because if you actually looked at your life with that kind of clarity, you'd have to admit some things you've been pretending aren't true. Like maybe you're not actually confused about what to do with your life. Maybe you know exactly what you should be doing, but you're scared it won't work out, so you're staying confused on purpose, because confusion is a great excuse for inaction. Or maybe you're not actually waiting for the right time, or the right resources, or the right feeling. Maybe you're just waiting for a guarantee that doesn't exist, and you know it doesn't exist. But admitting that would mean you'd have to try anyway, and risk failing in a way you can't blame on circumstances. Or maybe the reason you can't stick with anything long enough to get good at it isn't because you haven't found your passion. Maybe it's because getting good at anything requires you to be bad at it first, and you've built your entire identity around being naturally talented at things. So the moment something gets hard, you interpret that as a sign it's not for you, instead of a sign you're finally learning something real. Musashi would call all of this cloudiness in the mind. And the first thing he'd tell you to do is stop lying to yourself about it. Not in a harsh way, just in a factual way. The way you'd point out that someone's standing in the rain and getting wet. That's what seeing truly means. Acknowledging what's actually happening without the story you tell yourself about what's happening. But here's the thing nobody tells you about that kind of clarity. It's lonely, really lonely. Because once you start seeing things as they are, you can't unsee them. And most people around you are still living in their stories, and they need you to stay in yours because your story validates theirs. This is what Musashi meant by the path of aloneness. Not that you have to physically isolate yourself or become some hermit, but that real transformation, the kind that actually changes who you are, happens in a space where no one else can follow you. A space where you can't perform for anyone or get validation from anyone or blame anyone. Just you and whatever it is you're actually capable of when you stop pretending. He spent most of his life doing that. After his last duel at 29, he basically disappeared. Lived in caves and mountains, taught occasionally, wrote, trained, refined his understanding. People think that's impressive in a romantic way, like he was on some hero's journey. But I think it probably felt pretty empty most of the time. I think he probably wondered if he was wasting his life. I think he probably got lonely and doubted himself, and felt the same existential dread we all feel when we're not constantly distracting ourselves from our own thoughts. The difference is, he didn't run from it. He sat with it. And eventually something shifted. There's this section in the Book of Five Rings where he talks about water, how water adapts to any container, flows around obstacles, can be a tiny drop or a massive wave. And he says the warrior's mind should be like water, completely flexible, completely responsive, but always maintaining its essential nature. Most people read that and think it's about being adaptable, which sure, fine. But what he's really describing is something much harder. He's describing a state where you're no longer controlled by your need to be right or look good or avoid discomfort, where you can meet reality on reality's terms instead of demanding reality accommodate your preferences. Think about how you handle things going wrong. Someone criticizes you and you get defensive. A project fails and you spiral into self-doubt or make excuses. You try something new and it's harder than you expected, so you decide it's not worth it. That's not water. That's ice. Rigid, brittle, stuck in one shape. Water doesn't take criticism personally. It doesn't get offended by obstacles. It doesn't need things to be easy. It just moves. And when it can't move through, it moves around. And when it can't move around, it waits. And when it waits long enough, it erodes mountains. That's what Musashi figured out through all those years of duels and training. That mastery isn't about being better than other people. It's about being less fragile than you used to be, less dependent on circumstances being perfect, less attached to outcomes being what you hoped, not in a defeated way, in a free way. Because here's what nobody tells you about getting good at anything. The actual process of mastery is mostly just showing up when you don't feel like it and doing the boring, repetitive work that doesn't feel like progress, and being bad at things in front of people and failing in ways that make you question whether you should quit. And the only thing that gets you through that is not passion or discipline or motivation. It's a weird kind of detachment where you care deeply about the work, but you're not attached to immediate results or external validation, or your ego's need to always feel competent. Musashi calls this the void. The place beyond technique, where you're not thinking about what to do anymore, you're just doing it. Where knowledge becomes wisdom, where effort becomes effortless. Not because it's easy, but because you're no longer fighting yourself while you do it. But you can't get there by trying to get there. You can only get there by being willing to not get there for a very long time. By being willing to look stupid and feel lost and keep going anyway, without knowing if it'll ever pay off. That's the thing you're running from. Not the work itself, the uncertainty, the aloneness, the possibility that you might give everything you have and still not get what you want. That you might commit fully to something and find out you're not as special as you hoped. And so instead you stay in the comfortable misery of potential, where you could be great at something if you really tried, but you're never quite trying hard enough to find out if that's true. Where you're always preparing to start, but never starting. Where you're learning about mastery instead of actually pursuing it. Musashi would say that's a form of cowardice, not in a mean way, just factually. The samurai culture he came from was obsessed with death, because they understood that real cowardice isn't being afraid of dying. It's being afraid of living, afraid of committing, afraid of finding out who you really are when you stop hiding behind excuses and stories and the identity you've built from other people's opinions. There's this line in Dokkodo, do not hold on to possessions you no longer need. Most people think he's talking about physical stuff, but I think he's talking about the old version of yourself. The one who needed to be impressive or right or validated or comfortable. The one who couldn't start until conditions were perfect. The one who needed to know the ending before beginning the story. At some point, you have to let that person die. Not dramatically, just quietly, in a cave somewhere in your own mind. writing your own rules for how you're actually going to live instead of how you wish you could live. And yeah, it's lonely, because most people won't understand. They'll think you're being extreme or obsessive or taking things too seriously. They'll tell you to relax, to enjoy life, to stop being so hard on yourself, and they'll mean well. But what they're really saying is, come back to the comfortable delusion we're all living in. Stop making us uncomfortable by actually trying. You'll have to smile and nod and then go back to your cave. But here's what makes it worth it. On the other side of that loneliness, if you stay with it long enough, there's a different kind of connection. Not with people who validate your ego, with reality itself. With the actual texture of your life when you're not constantly narrating it or performing it or escaping it. With the quiet satisfaction of getting marginally better at something that matters to you for no reason other than the fact that you decided it matters. Musashi died at 62 in a cave, alone, probably in pain, writing about emptiness. Most people would call that a sad ending, but in his final words he said he had no regrets. He'd lived according to his own way. He'd mastered what he set out to master, not for anyone else, for its own sake. I think about that a lot. What it would feel like to get to the end and know you actually did the thing. Not the impressive version of the thing that looks good on social media. The real thing. The hard, boring, lonely, beautiful thing that only you know the full weight of because you carried it the whole way. You already know what your thing is. The thing you keep avoiding. The thing you tell yourself you'll start when the time is right. The thing that scares you precisely because it matters. Musashi would tell you the time is never right. The fear never goes away. The certainty never comes. You just start anyway, alone, in whatever cave you can find. And maybe that's not inspiring in the way we want it to be. Maybe it doesn't make you feel motivated or pumped up. Maybe it just makes you feel the weight of what you already know you need to do. Good. That weight is real. Everything else is distraction.